I'm not yet live.
We all have roles.
And 1, go.
Catholic Josie, hello again. We are back, and as always, I remain your brother Dylan Naika.
And I'm Pedro Farage.
Fabian Oliver.
We didn't do middle names.
No. I'm the only
Should
one.
We didn't even do last
You don't have?
episode.
No, we didn't. No.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about edit with Sean.
Oh, yeah.
It's good to be back with you, friends. Hopefully, by now, you have caught our first episode with Caitlin, aka the Moonwalker.
Michael Jackson.
That was a fun chat, wasn't it?
It was, indeed.
And today is also going to be fun because we've got Mr. Love in the house. Also going by the name Faby Baby. Y'all can guess where this conversation is going. No, I'm joking. All right, guys. So as you know by now, it's Catholic Youth Josie 2024, aka hashtag CYJ24. Our theme, as we said, chosen by our beloved Holy Father, Pope Francis, for this year, rejoicing in hope, taken from...
Roman 12:12.
He got the inflection wrong. Come on.
Where's it?
Where's the sign? Oh. Speaking of the t-shirt,
Yeah, Roman 12:12.
I'm glad we brought this up.
Romans 12.
Pedro, please show our audience. Let's turn it around and then show our audience. And
There we go.
say the inflection properly, please.
But I can't now. We have someone else.
All right, cut up. Must I say
I
it?
still can't.
Romans
Someone else
12:12.
do it. Roman
12:12. Fabian, can you get this right?
the
No.
beat.
Hey, join the club, sir.
What about this?
I don't know what
it
he
has to
does.
be like
There's
this.
an X and there's...
No,
I think
can't
I
do
got
that,
it.
Pedro.
I
Yes,
think
There we go.
There we go, Pedro.
Yay!
Minus something.
Finally.
Romans
This is our
12:12.
shirt, our-
Yes, indeed. CYJ 2024, Romans 12:12, rejoicing in hope. We thought it right and just fitting to start the year off in January by focusing on the theme itself, rejoicing in hope. And Caitlin, such a beautiful soul, such a beautiful family, such a beautiful story and journey. And we're so excited for her. A real model and a beacon of rejoicing in hope with, how did she say, without the Jesus, there's no hope, there's no joy.
And there's JOLZ for Jesus.
JOLZ for Jesus, new title. Thank you for reminding me. JOLZ for Jesus.
Given to us
Welcome.
by Caitlin.
Welcome to JOLZ for Jesus, officially. Yes,
Official.
JOLZ for Jesus, episode 2. As we promised, focusing on rejoicing in love, hope in love. And as we said, we've got with us here today our brother all the way from the dirty South.
Absolutely.
Wow, Baba. Again, you see, we're fans of the South. This is Caitlin from the
From the
South.
South, yes.
We don't have Lens in the house today. We have...
Well.
How do you
Originally
call it?
Turpentine.
The turf. Was it the turf?
The turf, the dirty South, but now I stay in Malbarton. It's a bit more Lani, so no, I don't think they like us calling it dirty. But I'm from originally the dirty South, so shout out to the dirty South. Yeah.
Shout out to the dirty South.
Representing.
Nice, brother. Well, and on that note, please do tell us more about yourself.
Well, you know where I'm from. I'm from the dirty South. Fabian Ashwin Oliver is my second name. I'm very happy for this invitation, so thank you, all of you guys. It brings me great joy to be here talking to young people about love on a Wednesday morning. No place I'd rather be. I'm trying to think, where do I start? My journey, whenever I think about it, takes me back when I was young. And when I grew up, we didn't go to church much. So Sundays was a day for Sunday course, for a nice plate. So my mother's cooking in the kitchen, and there's Bob Marley playing in the lounge.
Okay.
Mainly Bob Marley. So I still love Bob Marley a lot. I grew up on a lot of the struggle songs. And then, something happened in the next few years. With my mom, she lost a job and things got very hard in our lives. And I remember for the first time saying a real prayer. We had a balcony that you could go out of, and we were on the 5th floor. So there were people down that used to walk by. And occasionally I would take out planks. We had those small wooden planks, and I would throw it on people's head, and I would hide. And then, you see, so this is the balcony. But at this moment now, much later, with mom losing job, and I had lots of existential questions about myself, about faith, about God, if God exists, if God is real.
Hectic. What age was this, by the way?
I'm about grade 5. Grade
11.
5.
10, 11.
No, he doesn't want to reveal the age, so it's okay.
I'm about
Now I'm
11.
thinking about the planks now, yes. Still, I'm
About 11. Yeah, I think it's 11. Yeah, let's say 11, right? I'm about that. And so for the first time, I'm going to say a real prayer in my heart. And I'm sitting on this balcony where I once used to throw planks on people's heads and stuff like that. And the prayer went something along the lines of, God, if you're real, if you're there, please help my mother. And if you help my mother, then I'll help your church, or I'll do what I need to do, to be part of the church. And in the background of this, my mother had already started conversations about, you must go to catechism, you must join the church, and things like that. So I made this prayer, unknowing what it would yield and what would happen. And fast forward later, things got better. My mom found some work. And like anybody else, I kept my word, joined the church, and became an altar server many years later. Catechism first, but this journey is important because my questions about faith, my questions about love, my questions about God all start once I enter this community of faith. These people who believe in something that's beyond themselves, something that we call love, we call God, we call Father, we call Abba. And so as an altar server, my lens, even as I think now, is always looking at people coming to the altar and going back, sitting in the pews and asking the question, why? What brings them here? So already then now, as I think about it, I can see the philosophy and stuff and theology coming up. So that was my altar serving days, and my questions of faith. Became a youth leader, started a youth group, went on many camps, traveled a bit through the church of the archdiocese. So very grateful for that. And then went to study chemical engineering. Hated it. First year's fine because you do stuff you did in high school. So maths just applied, science just applied. And I had questions now, faith questions, and my priest at the time, now Bishop Duncan, sat me down and he said, why don't you become a priest? And I've never had inclinations towards being a priesthood, but I've always had inclinations towards the church. So I always felt that humanity side of me was missing when I studied engineering, but I knew that I always had a vocation towards married life.
How did you know this?
I don't know, and I can share part of my journey, but I always knew. And so I left that part because I was told priest, and I was like, that's not it. So I did engineering, didn't like it, and then I worked as an engineer for a year, 2 years actually in Pretoria. And then afterwards, my mom passed. And then I had, again, these questions about life, about faith, about love, about everything. And then a good friend of mine, and he's here, funny enough, Dylan, said to me, there's this community, that have invited me to study with them called St. Augustine. And it's theology. I think you'd be great at it. And the rest is history. I studied theology, fell in love with it, found it to be my passion, my vocation, thinking about God, faith, philosophy, humanity. And there's something in theology called liberation theology that's concerned about the poor, the marginalized, those who are pushed aside in society, and centering on them. So we are big thinking around those who are discarded. And in a way, that's my vocation. That's what I try to do. I currently work as a youth minister in an Anglican space, so I wanted to venture out for a bit and see what it's like in other communities. It was very brave and people were not happy, especially family, but I did it nonetheless. I believe if you talk the language of love, of justice, of peace, then you can't talk it only in one Catholic language. God is not a Catholic, God is not even a Christian, if you like. So I want to talk to all people of all faiths, of all walks of life, of all young people in South African contexts. and journeying this road. And that, in a long nutshell, is me.
Not long enough. I'm like wanting to hear more.
I feel like
Keep going.
this point's missing.
Well, okay, so we called you Mr. Love, and of course you are, as you said, you always felt an inclination to marriage. So maybe share that journey with us and where that's at now.
Sure. That journey. So I think, I don't know, very early on, I grew up with a single mother. And I think when I was young, around that same age, 11, 12, I had questions about fatherhood, fatherness, if that's a word, the presence of a dad, the questions of family, children always ask and stuff like that. But, you get to see your parent, your mom, in my case, the other side, the side they try to shield from you. And I was very close to my mother. And I remember thinking, when I grow up, I don't want to be this guy. The absent dad type. I have nothing against my father or whatever the case is, but I just had that inclination, that feeling that, no man, there's something here that we need to be present to. There's something deep about being part of this journey of raising kids that I'm yearning for. And a lot of my upbringing was the negativity I experienced. I said, well, I won't be that way. Pain can either you can transform your pain or you can transmit it, type of a thing. That Richard Rohr, the Catholic Franciscan, says it. So for me, a lot of my journey was a lot of the negativity I saw, no good role models of men and stuff like that. So for me, then it was to say, this is what I want to be. And this idea of being a father, partnering with someone, has always been something I thought of as spiritual, as real, as beautiful. I didn't know it's hard, but now I can tell you it's hard. But I think Dylan, once you said love makes us superheroes, and I can't think of a period in my life where I've had to learn to be so selfless, to share space, to live with someone. And this is the vocation. Vocation is when people see you to making it work, from two different families, two different backgrounds. If you can get it right, then humanity can get it right. And this is a symbol of the greater, sacrament of love that God embodies. And so, for me, that's what marriage is. I think I'm still learning. I think we only married, this will be 3 years this year. Love my wife. But it's a big extension of what it means to love. And I said earlier on, and you'll hear it, I'm involved in a lot of justice initiatives and thinking towards solidarity with the oppressed. And sometimes people like me, we think otherworldly, we think outside just the confinements of who is in the room. But love calls us to remind us that you must love those around you. And, that great Mother Teresa saying, if you want to make the world great, go home, love your family. So I'm holding the two worlds of, justice in the world and yet loving my family. And it's the love I have from having a kid is all the reward I need. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh, I don't even know where to go from
I knew it. I knew this was gonna. We are all on Fabian's hand like this at the moment.
I really
Sensei?
I'm still processing what he said, so
processing.
he's still processing. But thank you for sharing that. It's very deep and richful. We hope that we'll learn from you. What I've taken from it is I must go back home and love the family. That's what we must all do. If we want to change the world, we must love the family. That's very deep. Thank you for that. Yeah.
So what I wanted to ask, you said now you work as a youth pastor in the Anglican space.
Yeah.
How does you coming from a Catholic background and now moving into the space, is it different? Is it challenging? How do you work around that?
Yeah. So I got like I said, when I started the theology, I fell in love and I thought this is what I want to do. So I immediately resigned at work. They tried to keep me another 6 months. I said, no, I will figure it out. I went to one of my lecturers and I said, this is what I want to do. And immediately my lecturer said, relax. You're only on year 2 of your studies. There's nothing that you can do at this moment. And I was like, okay. Looked at different organizations and stuff like that. At the time, Theology of the Body was looking for someone to do some stuff there. I applied to them. There was other, different things. And then I had classmates who were Anglican. We had great relationships. And they said, well, there's this church looking for a youth pastor. I don't know if you have background in youth ministry. And I was like, background? I've got a lot. So I said, look, I'll apply. I am Catholic, I'll be honest, and you have to write a letter and say, this is, my story and this and that or the other. So I thought about it. I had a chat with my family. Some of them were not happy. I have quite strong Catholic conservative family that said, we have the Eucharist and everyone else is playing. So they were very unhappy about that decision. But part of me, like I said, was to talk to other people of other faiths, journey with them, learn from them. And I'm big on ecumenism. I'm big on interfaith dialogue. So I already knew that then. So I applied. I wrote and I read. One of the things I expressed in the letter was, I acknowledge I'm a Catholic and I have certain limitations, certain understandings. But I will love the youth. I work with youth and I'm open. And I thought they neglected me because it went on for long. And then after a month, I got a call saying, we'd like to interview you. Then 2 interviews in. And I thought it's possible. Now, if you've ever been to an Anglican church, the service, the mass seems very similar. The same background in terms of the liturgy they use and stuff like that. So it felt, I mean, I've been to some Anglican churches where it's more Catholic than Catholic. Vatican I style, back facing the people and stuff like that, Latin rites and stuff like that. Not all. But it's been a journey of learning, of being open, of seeing, of not judging. And I think that's a good Christian virtue, Christian tenet to have, is just to be open and to learn. And like I said, I think we all speak in the same language of love, and I will find it in the youth, and be it Catholic youth, Anglican youth, whatever youth, which is my focus. I think we're all speaking and yearning for the same thing. And that's the most important thing. So I don't try to get stuck up in dogmas and doctrines and whose theology is right or wrong. I have my own opinions. But so it's been beautiful.
It sounds to me like you met that criteria. Fabian shared with me once when he went for the interview at the Anglican Church, St. Francis, right, in Park View.
Park View, yeah.
And I think you told me one of their closing lines was, as long as you're a Pope Francis Catholic, you're welcome. We don't want a Benedict Catholic. Is that what they said?
Something. One of the priests jokingly said, she's so smart, she's a professor at UJ, and she jokingly said, as long as you are Pope Francis, then we should be fine.
I think that just comes to mind, because I think something Pope Francis is really clear on. He tends to tell people, let's leave the theology to the theologians. He's a man who doesn't like to get caught up in all the yours is right and mine is wrong, etc. He's like forgetting the main stuff, a lot like the voice of Jesus in the gospel. You guys are forgetting that the love. You guys are forgetting the core purpose why Jesus was here. I want to backtrack. I think you've spoken beautifully into love in the context of youth and your sort of sense of vocation there. But I think you shared beautiful things to me about what you got from your mom. And I always, when I see you as a person and I see that gift of love so tangibly in you, I always sort of shoot back to that time that you told me that you were just so blown away by the love this woman had. Could you share with us, like, how do you feel you got that from her?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a saying by a philosopher in America, Cornel West, and he says, I am who I am because somebody loved me. And I've adapted it as my own, So I am who I am because somebody loved me. We all are who we are because somebody loved us. Somebody cared for us. Somebody attended to us. Somebody was concerned about our trajectory in life. And so for me, that's a fundamental starting point. I know inherently that I come from a community of people. I always say I'm a child of the soil. I come from a family broken, diverse, in need of much healing, absolutely. But nonetheless, I come from a people, and for me that's a big starting point in my thinking and my theologizing. And like you said, my mother's a big pinnacle in that way of thinking. So like I said, the Bob Marley music, the lovely food and the aroma that I get. But also I was a house of, in my family is lots of drinking, or lots of fluids, and spirits and things like that. And weekends was that type of space. But what I observed growing up is a lot of people stayed over. So I have a lot of family who are families to me still today that are not my biological family. But these are people whom my mother met through, life had taken her through these people, through so many different angles. And, some people they met at one stage, my mother's life, she stayed at a shelter type of thing. And she met this friend and they became friends, and I still have as an aunt today. So I often stayed with people who would live with us for periods of time on the weekends. We had a nice 2-bedroom place, flat that we stayed in, that the flat I told you about. And often I would sleep with my mother because people would use that room and things like that. So always making space, and people with children, sometimes, just people. And I learned a lot through just watching, seeing the type of person that she was, this heart. And I don't think just my mother, I think lots of mothers, I think lots of maternal figures in our lives, grannies. I know so many people that were raised by their granny, knew their faith through their granny, learned to be Catholic or whatever, through their grannies, through their mothers. And I have a feeling or an opinion that African culture or Africanness, even blackness, is a culture that's deeply maternal.
Yeah.
And often forgets it and turns it into something, but it's deeply from the bosom of umama, of ma, and this forms a deep part of me and who I am today, and the person, even in the ministry, that I try to extend a loving hand to others. I always see that notion of it's not just biological. You can extend beyond that into people that you see on the streets. And my life has been a roller coaster of ups and downs. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad. So, I know what it feels like to be poor. I know what it feels like to be middle class. And I don't think I've ever been rich, sadly. But I always think of I think I carry that in my heart and in my love for people. In the work that we do, I work a lot with the homeless. And often people will say, is this not tiring for you? Don't you get, exhausted? Because you work with, that community. You shouldn't romanticize this. They can be nasty too. And I always say to people, any work is tough, and this one is no different. Beyond seeing Christ in the work that I do, Christ in the homeless and in the poor, I also see myself. And for me, that's a big invitation, that I know that at any point that could be me. Because I saw it growing up, I've seen people great and then not so great. So I understand the slippery slope that is life, and that so many people of color go through. And so for me, that just opens my heart more to extend arms, ideas, thoughts towards what can we do. So I always think of my love in a maternal way. This is the love of our mothers. And we must attach to that, I think sometimes we caught up with being tough or angry or aggressive, or this is what a man should be like. And I think there's a lot missing on what a man should be like in society, but not lose sight of that maternal nature. And the Catholic Church, has it right on the emphasis on Mary, on the eternal mother, the first apostle, the only person that can say, this is my body, this is my blood, is a woman. Ironically, in the midst of our great tradition and so many male priests, the pinnacle of it all is a woman who gives birth to this great Jesus that we have. And so I hold even to Mary as this maternal figure of eternal love. Yeah.
You haven't experienced it in the physical realm. Do you think that is love because someone has loved you before and you are who you are today because of that person? Or do you have a different definition of love?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm not sure anyone can fully answer what is love. I think love is abstract. It's something that you cannot touch. So in a way, it's part of God's mystery. It's there. We see it. We feel it. But we don't have it in full. What does the Bible say? Now we know in part, but someday we will see. Eye to eye. Face to face. The full picture will be revealed, and I think that's true of love as well. But it has so many dimensions. It's a feeling of when you feel close to your loved ones, to your lover, Pedro. Is that your language? No. All right, maybe there's a different calling. But it can be that feeling. It can be so much more. But maybe not just only a feeling. Yeah. Maybe love is also doing. And love forces us to do things differently, to be tender, to care. Maybe love is also in the touch. When I became a father recently, I Google weird things, and one of the things I found out is that without touch, in the first few days of a baby's life, or few weeks rather, the baby will cease, it will die without touch. And that's an extension, I think, of love, of being close, of being held. And I hold all these, the abstract, the mystery, but ultimately love is doing. It's a doing word for me. Okay. The most, it's what you do in society. So there's this saying again by Cornel West that justice is what love looks like in public. Tenderness is what love feels like in private. So justice, when we see the abundance of justice in society, that's love. Equality, and I don't know what you define as equality, but when we see it, the fruits of it, that's love taking place. Tenderness, affirming, is what love feels like in private. Yeah.
And attaining that love, what do you think is missing in our society? In actually seeing love, I don't want to say in its fullness, but from people who have faced various challenges growing up or currently in a world where we find there's so much violence in our communities. What do you think is missing? What is that one thing that I can say, if we attain it, we'll be closer to finding or fulfilling that love?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. It's so deep, your question, and I think it's the one we can think about forever and ever, and we can put it in every ministry that we want to do. If you want to be a youth leader, if you want to be a priest, if you want to do justice and peace evangelization, how do you spread the message of love? How do you feel love? How do you talk about justice in a way that affirms love? And that's the central. If we get that right, I think we get a lot of things right. But I think what it does say, and when we see our world, is that there's a lot of perhaps missing links with love. Yeah. A lot of things that have replaced love. A lot of brokenness, a lot of hurt, a lot of woundedness. And I'm not trying to create a polarization, but that also is an invitation for us today in this world where there's so much woundedness, so much pain, so much war, and literal war. We thought war was a thing of ancient days, and now we are witnessing 2 wars in a space of 2 years, 3 years, and living in it. And in Africa, there's wars almost every day, civil wars. There is so much breakage in families. It's caused by so many things, our racial history in our country. Then love asks us to go back into the world and to try and restore what was broken. But maybe we don't need to think of it as we are superheroes, but that God changes the world. Yeah. And that not us. So we do our parts in assisting God who is transforming the world. And maybe if we think about it as that, we will be less stuck up on my interpretation of love versus your interpretation of love. And more try to think more about God's invitation through scripture, through humanity, all things point, and that's this great mystery of of sacrament. All things point to who God is. So I think as much as I'm pointing to the earth groaning, which is from Romans earlier on, I am also trying to point towards opportunity, possibility, and that's who God is. God never gives up. And Jesus he holds firm to that by saying, remember, I'm with you till the very end. And in Jesus, perhaps love has a fullness. It has someone who is with us, and maybe we are not just alone in that. So it's. I don't want to. I want us to think about that question, because I don't think I have the answer to it. But I think we are called to journey, and maybe as people of faith, like I said earlier, I'll just repeat this Franciscan priest Richard Rowe, who says all religions, no matter what they are what talk about fundamentally what you do with your pain.
Yeah.
And if you don't transform your pain, you will transmit it. All religions are about confronting the cross. And if you don't deal with your own cross, perhaps then you are one who adds to the crosses of others in society and in the world. And we can think of this in many different ways, spiritually, economically, socially. So love comes to us. There's that threefold love: God, love neighbor, and the one we often forget, love self. And oftentimes we're doing the other two quite pragmatically, but not the first one, self-love. What does it mean to say you are loved? And there is, again, I'm turning to this Franciscan priest. He's got a saying that says, most of us were taught that we would change. God would love us if we changed. And I meet people often who have that thinking or that theology that God will love me when I change. But he says, hold on. God doesn't want you to change. In fact, love becomes the very thing that forces us, that allows us, that gives us the possibility of change. So when we just acknowledge, experience that God, you were here this whole time, loving, sitting, waiting, perhaps that's the realization that I am loved. And I don't have to do anything. I don't have to go to mass, confession, and all these things. And those things are important. I'm not trying to dismiss them, but they are not replaces of God's love. God's love is. And maybe for us is to realize that, to believe it, to feel it, to experience it, and then to, like I said, allow love to do in us, to see God and Jesus in the world. And maybe that's where we can start, just with ourselves, and build the bridges that we need to do with our communities, our friends, our families, our networks. But yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Speak so well into our topic, of hope in love.
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful way of putting that through. And I mean, obviously we're in the context of youth ministry, and I know you've got many years now, as you said, in that. How do you feel that's met, Fabian? I know you've opened up to me a few times of just how it can be such a struggle with these youth, but how do you feel this whole message of love, hope in love, and even your concept of love as a minister in your capacity? How do you feel that's met in the young people? Do you see it bouncing right off them in the one ear, out the other ear? Do they get it? Do you think, maybe can you speak into that experience with us?
Yeah. So I think youth ministry is it's like what can I say, a moving river. One that is quite turbulent, because their lives are quite all over the place. They got school on one space, they've got sports, they've got family backgrounds, that some is not easy, some is okay. And then they've got identity. Who am I going to be? Who is this person? And when you're young, your identity matters. So they're figuring out a lot of things. And life often changes. A lot of youth move from place to place, from pillar to post. But in all my years, I think one of the things that is quite stagnant, or constant rather, is they are searching for something. They are searching. And I think all of us are searching. We're all on a pilgrimage. But I think with young people in particular, it doesn't matter, through the music, through the lingo, through what they say, even in trying to be cool, the search is there. And I think sometimes they mask better than others, but the pain is also there. But I think young people are searching, and I think they're searching for something that's real, something that's true, something that's close to them, something that speaks to them, something that affirms who they are, who they feel they are. And with us, that language is God, isn't it? That search for beauty, that search for the real, that search for truth, that search for identity. All of this we find ourselves is to say, I am who I am in God, and in the fullness of God is who I am, or made in the image and likeness of God. So we are all pilgrimaging backwards, in a sense, to find who we are. And I think young people, then it's an opportunity for us as ministers not to do programs that have a goal per se, and some do have, I'm not trying to shade them, but to do journeying. To do journeying with, to do, pilgrimage with them. We are all on the search, and perhaps Jesus meets us where we are. And so sometimes that looks like a church building. Other times it means sitting and listening to people who are sitting and listening to their own music. Other times, even for me, it means listening to young people smoke an occur pipe, bubbly, and ask them questions. Hear where they are situated. Listen to the context, the struggle. Where is God in their midst? Sometimes it means holding off on judgment. It means maybe understanding how God is speaking in that space. And so maybe if we think a bit more about journeying, there's a lovely story. A priest that I work with told me, she said her son was at school many years ago and he was misbehaving. And they came in, worried, what's the problem with our son and stuff like that. And, the Sacred Heart is the school, so Catholic school. Then the headmaster, whatever, came and says, normal stuff that boys do, but don't worry. Jesus only got his ministry started at 30. So there's still ample time. You know what I mean? And sometimes I think we want these perfect beings. And we ourselves are not perfect. But, and that was a nice reminder that Jesus only started when he was 30. So don't worry. Plant the seed. Do what you can. Be in the spaces and allow God to do the rest. And for me, I think I've allowed myself to be challenged enough to know that God is working. God saves people. We don't. We do our parts. And so for us is to have those ears, those eyes in spaces on the sports field. Anyway, at the Shisanyama, we are there. But yeah, I think it's an ongoing question. But I think that would be my thoughts around it.
What you just spoke of now reminds me of my journey as a volunteer in Bosco. The main thing Father Dingwani would preach about was accompaniment, was to journey with young people, because you'll never know where the journey leads. And for Salesians, so to say, they would say the holy ground is always at the playground, because that's where young people are most free to be themselves. So once they feel comfortable or they're open to being themselves with you or with anyone, that's where you will find that they are able to find God in those spaces. So trying to box young people, to throw them in the church, to throw them in catechism, not saying it's a bad thing, but also allow them to explore their own relationships with God in spaces where they find comfortable. Sometimes, like you say, the Shisanyama is the most comfortable for them in that moment, but it doesn't mean they can't find God in that space. So allowing them the freedom to explore who they are and try to figure out who they are and actually fall in love with themselves. That's where they will be able to understand the unconditional love of God, because already they have love within themselves. So I think that's, I don't want to say it's a challenge within youth ministry, but it's a challenge that our elders are facing, and forgetting that they too went through journey of life. They too had their own experiences, and now they have seen the challenges. They have seen, this path kind of might lead in the wrong direction, and they're okay to be concerned. They're right to be concerned with certain things, but they need to also allow the person to be and to figure it out themselves, because by trying to force them into seeing those mistakes, they they might question your intentions. And sometimes it's like you're trying to box them, like, I'll never be you. That's where you find children be like, I was not there in your youth.
Absolutely.
You did what you did there, and now you want to force me to live your life, and they can't do that. So giving young people the platform and the space to be young and to be themselves and to fall in love with themselves, because their bodies are changing. The world is changing. So they're no longer 5 where I could run to mommy and cry. Now when you go to mommy and cry, mom shouts back and you're like, Aibo, okay, when did that happen? So there's a lot of changes going on around them. They're trying to fit in with the popular crew, and they can see that, but that's not who I want to be. But if I don't, I am on the outside. So how do I be myself within certain spaces? So allowing them the freedom to just be, and that is the greatest gift I think you can give to a young person. Like listening to their music and just sometimes sitting down with them and not even saying anything means so much more than actually having a conversation. It means they know that you are there. You are there to support them with whatever, with their own journey, and they will always find their way. I think, like you just said, now we try to rush the spiritual journey for our young people, and we forget that it is a journey. So you have to allow the journey to take place. Like, I like how you put it. It's a pilgrimage. So life is a pilgrimage. So let's be on this pilgrimage instead of waiting for it to end in some exit. Yeah.
Yeah, you say that it's a journey that we are, meaning that we are from a point A going to point B. Would you, on your own words, say or believe or tell me that love comes from point A, and that we, as we journey, we need also to spray it until we reach to our point B?
That's a tricky question to answer. Because I'm not sure. I think about love as point A and point B. I think we can say them, where I started and where I'm going, where we think we're going. But life has its own ideas. And if life has its own ideas, God has a plan and a purpose. And I can't even tell you. If I could say, I would be here chatting to you many years ago. Someone told me that, I would have laughed at them. And I don't know, love meets us where we are, but at different points people realize it, acknowledge it, share it. And for everyone, it's so different, and that's why the journey is the journey, because your point A might be my point B or C or D. And you may have covered my X already and I don't even have it yet, but I see it in you. So I'm maybe confusing it a bit, but it's to say that, not everyone is the same. And like I'm saying, we're all journeying with different crosses, different things that we have in our hearts, different plans. Ultimately, I think if it would be nice to say in an ideal world, there's love will take you from here, you share it here. But that's just not how it happens, isn't it?
In real life.
And people get heartbroken. They turn away from faith, the cross, Jesus, the church. And there's that aspect too. Some young people are off in the wilderness, experiencing something they're yearning for in the taverns or somewhere else, or in boyfriends, or whatever the case is, and without sounding too judgmental. We all have to search this love and always try to place our love with the greater love that is God. So it's always greater than ourselves, because the moment we say, I have love and you don't have it, that's arrogance talking. That's the ego talking. That's probably not love. You know what I mean? Jesus says it nice. If you want to save your life, you lose it. And all those who, want to lose their lives for the sake of something greater than themselves, then they'll save it in a way, because they'll find it. And maybe that's something that we have to realize for ourselves at various parts of our journeys, what it means in terms of the work we do, the studies we take, the person who we become. Always, it's challenging us. We live in a world where you have to work and things like that, and we often don't talk about it. It's not, when you get to work, it's not on your modus operandi. Pedro, you have these things to meet, but in all of them, remember love. You know what I mean? So we have to try and reimagine the world, and that's the kingdom of God in a way that puts love at the center, not profit, not capital, not exploitation of people and bodies, especially of women's bodies, to put love at the center. And that's maybe the point A, B, C, D, X, A. Yeah.
You mentioned turning away from, the young people experiencing so much brokenness. And so I think you had like a list there, turning away from so many things with church. I think after you said church, I wanted to add, and the home. Because while we've been talking, I've been thinking of how young people seem to have very little hope in the love in the home.
Yeah.
Dare I call it domestic church, because I know in so many cases that's not what it is anymore. God being kicked out of the home. I don't know what your experience maybe has been in your conversations with young people or in ministering to them, of how much they value that place as, this common saying of English, it starts at home. You've beautifully shared with us even your roots of, journeying already with love and perhaps discovering the beauty of it in the context of the home. Where do you think young people are at with this? Of hope in the love of, even so many of them are, you mentioned marriage. I think most of them are like, forget it. It's not going to happen. Kids, it's almost like they can laugh at you. I've got siblings who are in that space. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, good question. I think in many ways the home is the first church. It's where you first maybe think about God, hear about God, pray, learn to pray. For some, even not. So the idea of God maybe is totally absent, but it's also where you would experience love for the first time from family.
True.
And many times this shapes your image of God even. And I think a lot about the fact that we often have an image of God as Father and many homes without one. And what does this do to our spirituality about God who is absent in my life, and yet there's this eternal parent who is also a man that cares about me. And for many people, that relationship, that thinking it's harmful. They don't like it. They run away from that image of God. And of course, God is not a man. And many people hear this much later on in their lives that actually, no, some have been abused, and stuff like that. But it all goes back to home. It can be the initial beauty or the initial brokenness. And I think many people are projecting what they come from at home, still recovering. I heard a stat that says a lot of people when they're older will have issues of self-esteem as adults, big managers, whatever the case is. But it stems when you ask them, where does this insecurity come from? They'll say, well, when I was young, I was bullied at school. How old were you? Grade 2. Grade 2. You're a manager in a big corporate company. But these things stick with us. These names, these feelings, these affirmations, this tenderness that's lacking from male figure or mother figure is lacking, and sometimes that's the first church, and it can be painful, it can be beautiful, but glory, hallelujah, that doesn't end there. There's the church, and in many ways, the altar of the church where we share the sacred meal, the eternal equality of God's self. It doesn't end. It's not a fixed thing. Then we go out into the world, and the world becomes our altar of thanksgiving, of bringing others to the table, of sharing, of being one with each other, of loving, of Jesus seeing everyone who is around. And so the church projects this image onto the world, and we go out into the world and we go back to the church to be restored, to be reminded, and some people to feel this love. And for me, that's why the church has that powerful symbol. The Eucharist is a strange thing. People eating flesh and drinking blood, but becoming something else. It's a very strange thing. It's deeply, mysterious. And it's no space where it can't touch. That strangeness to touch our homes and our hearts as well, to remind us that when we eat of the substance, it becomes us and we trust it. It is reflected. We are reflected in God as well. So the story of the home, the story of the bullied at school, the story of the depression, the loneliness, As Christians, we say we have good news. It doesn't end there. There is glory, hallelujah. And for many people who are experiencing life on Good Friday, where they feel like this cross is never ending, be it the home, be it whatever the case is, we say, well, there is Easter Sunday. And there's life beyond the grave. And God is. And that means there's no space, there's nothing in our lives that God won't touch. And so that should at least be our hope in love. So yeah, I'm not sure I fully answer the question, but that's my thinking. Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's the good news.
There it is.
So we like to challenge ourselves. We like to challenge the youth to get practical. This whole thing of making a vague resolution, and never mind New Year's resolutions. We passed that conversation now. But I saw a beautiful post on social media of this year I'm going to lose weight. And then they're like, okay, great. Now let me give you a better version. I'm going to drink only water. I'm going to eat less. I'm going to cut the sugar, etc. And they had a whole list of the vague statements. And then here's the plan, though. What's the plan? Would you say you have an intentional way of loving more on a day-to-day basis? Would you say that? Would you say there's actual steps that you take in your personal agency? And you beautifully spoke into love as doing, love as choices, what we often hear. Are there those choices or those deeds that you commit to on a day-to-day basis, or that you think, that young people can think into or challenge themselves more to become people of love? That big question of how do I become a person of love? I think it's what all of us want.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. I think, and I like the fact that these are practical steps that are real, I think for me, I'm always thinking about it, always trying to implement them. And I think of some are practical and basic. Think more. So listen more, not think more. Listen more, speak less. This is a deep starting point, because every person is sacred. And we say this in our faith. Every person is made in the imago Dei, the image and likeness of God. Jesus has that lovely saying where they're asking him about who are gods and who are lords. And he says, don't you know also you? Also you are also sacred. You are also gods, small g. But nonetheless, you all carry the imago Dei. Every person, no matter who they are, carries a story that if you would listen, it would make you weep. And for me, that's always what I'm thinking. Whenever you interact with people, everybody carries a story that if you listened, you would cry. And I think that's a good starting point. We live in a society that's so polarized. Left and right. I'm radical, you are not, you're conservative. I think this, you think that. I vote this, you vote that. I think women are this, you don't think that way. And so we quickly sign, okay, here's our wall. There's us, then there's them. But listening asks us the deeper questions but remember you are one. Remember you are united. And we speak this language. By our virtue of our baptisms, we are brother and sister. And whatever, pronoun fits you, we are united in that. And so by listening, it's a powerful, powerful avenue to love more. Yeah. To speak less. And when you speak less, you learn to judge people less. You learn to understand more. And then another thing I think of when I was chatting to someone recently, they said, you can't fake humility. Yeah. You can try when you see Father. How are you, Father? Hey, Mass was good. Hey, everything is fine. Father, please, a small prayer. Here's my rosary. You know what I mean? We can fake it. But I think love asks us to be real. And humility is a sign that you don't want to be served. You want to serve. To serve. And I think that's a real thing, of an attitude of I want to serve. And through it, you always put yourself, what does Jesus say? Don't sit in the front so that we can all see you. And later you'll be embarrassed when the other people do come. But rather sit at the back. You know what I mean? What does it really mean? And I find the idea of washing people's feet to be quite gruesome when I think about it. But it's real. To become foot washers in the world, what does that ask us? And I think it has to do a lot with humility. You don't have to be smart or knowledge or have everything or think you're the best. Let the phones be smart. We need to be humble. We need to have a heart. We need to have compassion. And so I think humility is a big one. And then I said it now, I think compassion. The opposite of compassion often is not hate. It's indifference. It's have a heart to see, have a heart to hear. And I think we live in a world where we know our story and that's enough.
Yeah.
We live in our boxes and that's enough. And I often tell people that, your relationship with God is personal, and it's true. But we don't come from a faith that's just about you and God.
Yeah.
It's a communal faith. And even in the earlier translations of scriptures, a lot of the scriptures were put to actually we. It's a communal faith. We do this together. We're in it together. And to remember that drives our compassion, that it's not just me. I'm not alone. We've got this lovely t-shirt on Ubuntu, And I would say the Trinity is the highest values of Ubuntu.
Yes.
God as community. And then to live in this way of compassion. There are people who are poor in our society. We need to have a heart to feel. And not just to feel, but to radically shape our lives into the work we do in all spaces of our lives. There are people who are abused daily. This should make us wrestle with it, wrestle with our faith and the work we do. But we need to have a heart first to feel, to think about. There are people who are excluded on the grounds of their sexuality. And these are children of God. We need to feel. We need to allow ourselves to be in the other's shoes. And I think the great model of love is Jesus. So when we are lost and we don't have the practicalities, I think in Jesus we can find some of it. And everyone, that's the beauty of our faith. You may not see what I see, but we're invited into the story of Jesus to see what he sees. What does it mean to say, to the rich man, he loved him first. And then that story. The guy comes, he says, I have all these things, I practiced my faith. And then Jesus did what? Looked at him and said, and loved him, and then said, there's only one thing you lack. Big critique on the things we want to keep and not get rid of. Not just riches only, riches included, of course, but what we choose to keep to ourselves. But Jesus had to first look at him with love. There's that lovely word, compassion. And I forget the Greek word is larangitio or something like that. And it means to be moved by the very bowels of your stomach. So where you moved so much so by other ones, by someone else. And that's the word they use for Jesus. Whenever he heals, whenever he interacts with people, he has compassion on them. He has compassion on them. In all the Gospels, he has compassion on them. Compassion is the engine that drives our Christian lives. And so we must be invited to live a life that's considerate of others and of ourselves. A lot of great faith ministers are running at a dry because we're always worried about others, but also ourselves. And so that's
Today, speaking about this love, I'm just reminded about this Sesotho hymn, Kifumane. It speaks about, I have found him, my love. So it speaks about God being my love. And I think once we understand that love and God's love, that's when we'll be able to share that love with others. Because, like you said, we want to give so much, but sometimes you can't give what you really don't have. So by truly finding God's love, we'll be able to share this love of God with everyone. You'll be able to see God within everyone that you meet. And I think to some extent the church history, I don't know much about it. There's a lot I don't know about our church history, but through its pains and challenges and the very dark side of it, the one thing that has remained constant was the love of God within the Eucharist, and going to Mass and celebrating Mass. It will always remind me of God being that love. And I think if we, as people, in a practical sense, just try to remember that yes, it's okay to think about how you can share and spread that love, but you need to also remind yourself that you are loved and you are loved. And if you are able to remember that love, you'll be able to give it. Because if you forget to love yourself and you forget to feel that love from others and from God, what kind of love are you giving out? So by remembering that love and holding on to God's love, you'll be able to share God's love with other people. And I think that is the one major thing that we need within our communities, our societies, and within us as young people, is to remember that God loved you first. He knew you before you were born, and he calls you his. Isaiah 43, somewhere there. He called you by name, so he has always loved you. So once you remember that and you hold on to that, you'll be able to share that love with others.
And in all of it, Jesus just becomes more and more beautiful. Just fall more and more in love. Well, it sounds to me there's a lot of love to hope in. And we'll wrap it up there. And Karabo, would you like to gong us out?
Yes.
Go for it. You forgot your gong in the beginning. Question number 1. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning,
is
is
now,
now,
and ever shall be, world
without
without
end.
end.
Amen.
Amen.